Jim, I just mentioned this at the start of the show about, at first it was funny that people were having the run on toilet paper, and then it was embarrassing, and now it's pissing me off because, to me, it's emblematic about how far we've gone in just a couple of generations from people who genuinely lived with the hardship of knowing how much food or fuel or clothes they could have. And to me, it's an example about how ridiculously pampered we are here in the 21st century. And also, when push comes to shove, that our instinct is, I'm all right, Jack, bugger you.
Yes, and we've seen both extremes of that, I think, recently. Certainly down by the fires, we've seen fantastic self-sacrifice and a willingness to help others and all pull together. But I counted that as about my 15th natural or unnatural disaster that I've been involved in, and most societies are remarkably fragile. Certainly our society is. We've had nothing but good news and prosperity as a society now since the end of the Second World War. And what struck me is in the last couple of days, we've decided to stockpile antibiotics and antivirals. That is, buy them from overseas and locate them in Australia. And it does indicate to me that there are certain areas in our economy and in our society where we are very, very vulnerable. We've prospered from globalisation, and that's fantastic, but it's led us, I think, too far. And I support the Energy Minister, Paul, who today announced that he's about to sign the agreement with the US for access to their crude oil. But of course, that is only when you can move that crude oil, and that will be very, very valuable in other situations. In an extreme situation, we could face lack of pharmaceuticals, lack of fertiliser, lack of liquid fuel. And this is what worries me about the funniness of toilet paper fights. It is an indicator that this is a wake-up call for this mighty nation of ours.
Yeah, it's this thing where, David, I mean, as I said, we've gone through the whole sort of gamut of emotions about this being a little bit funny, a little bit frustrating, and now it's a whole lot demeaning. What about that point about how, in a couple of generations we've gone from rationing to absurdities like this?
It's disappointing that we've reached this point as a nation and as a society. It bears no logical form of intelligence could look at it and say, A, that there's been any utterings that could suggest to people there would be a shortage, and even so, you would think of all things that people would stockpile, you wouldn't think toilet paper would be at the top of the list. You also wouldn't think that you'd have people at war with each other over it. It's a society that's lost civility, that's lost common sense, and also that's lost the ability to listen and trust authorities. And that there is equally a very challenging thing for all of us, that people, they can be told 100 times, toilet paper is made in Australia. We are able to meet the shortfall. There will be no shortage, and yet there's such a level of distrust at the moment in this nation that people will thumb their nose at that and resort to behaviour like this.
Liz, I also talk about this a lot when it comes to road rage and other forms of crime, that there are so many people who, it seems, have like a pre-lit fuse. There was a case just this weekend of a bloke who jumped out of his car with an axe, trying to have a go at somebody because, they'd had a small dispute, somebody cut somebody off, all the rest of it here. I think this is a product of a million different things. Some that we can talk about on television without losing our jobs, and some that we can't. But what's your sense about this? Because I think it's a moment where we should look at this for what it is, but what has got into this too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right in saying there's a million different things that play into this. But something that occurred to me recently was swine flu was just 11 years ago. In America alone, 60 million people were diagnosed, and it took out 15 million people. 15 million, sorry, not 15 million, 10,000 died. So 15 million people were diagnosed, 10,000 died. And I don't remember anywhere near this kind of hysteria over over swine flu just 11 years ago. And that really got me wondering how and why and what as a society we've come to make us relate in this way to something that isn't even 3 months old, really, in terms of public awareness. And here we are, like the situations that you've talked about. I think many things play into it, including some people's mental health. Same goes for climate alarmism. This kind of thing can really play on people who are susceptible. And we saw that with another article by The Guardian just today. This fellow who'd written to climate scientists, heard back from 40 of them saying how angry they were, how depressed they were, how full of despair they were. He just got 40 responses, and for the next 3 years he tapped out. He turned off his phone and he wasn't doing okay. He wasn't dealing okay. He's since come out and said that he's more emotionally stronger now. But for some people, this kind of alarmism is more than they can take, and it actually takes a very real toll on them. Normal people, healthy people, I'd like to think, don't behave the way that we've seen certain people behaving in the footage that we've all been watching of people ransacking supermarkets, you know, literally having punch-ups over toilet paper.